What's going on, everybody? Applersky here, back with another new video and another new series that I'm starting to kick off for the summer. This is a series focusing on Resident Evil, and it's going to be the Road to Requiem. Very, very excited for Resident Evil 9, and I've been relatively quiet about the Resident Evil series on my channel, mainly just because I've been kind of waiting for something concrete to surface as far as, announcements go. But Resident Evil is one of my favorite franchises in gaming. It's one of the first series that got me into PlayStation, along with Tomb Raider. And the first one I actually played was Resident Evil 2, because I didn't get my PlayStation until later on. Resident Evil 1 had already been out for a while, but after finishing 2, I went back, played the first one, and then I played every one since, even all the spin-offs and every single title that possibly exists in the Resident Evil franchise. I try to play. They're not all great, but I will say the numbered entries are all either excellent or above average, I would say, including the one that we're looking at on screen and the one that we're starting with for this video, which is Resident Evil 6. And this is considered to be probably the weakest of the franchise. And in this video, we're going to explain why people think so, why I kind of disagree, and why it's still definitely a Resident Evil game and worthwhile to play, especially leading up to the events of Resident Evil 9. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into the video.
Resident Evil 6.
Alright, so the way this game is structured is very different from previous Resident Evil titles. This one is basically, it was made as like a culmination of what has came before. So you play as there's actually 4 different campaigns, and you can choose them in any order that you see fit. The game's prologue that you just seen in the opening of the video focuses on Leon. And so we're going to start here with Leon's campaign, and we're going to kind of go through each one and what it does differently from the other, because they do all have kind of their own theme as far as gameplay elements and story, but they all do intersect at certain parts of the game. So you'll see it from different angles of the different characters involved with kind of the same worldly event that's happening. So it starts out with Leon and newcomer Helena meeting for the first time, and then of course the return of Hunnigan. Leon is still under the president's command. This is a couple years after the events of Resident Evil 4, where he saved the president's daughter. Now this isn't the same president. This is his predecessor, but they were friends and everything like that. So there still is that tie to the president from Resident Evil 4. Leon is here at this school campus, and there's some sort of a presentation going on, and I'm going to keep this kind of spoiler free too, for those of you that maybe have skipped out on this due to it's kind of like it's like the black sheep of the Resident Evil series, right? So some people newer to the franchise may have not even given it a chance, and if you played it earlier when it first came out and hated it or whatever, I kind of urge you to go back and play it. It still holds up. And so Leon's experience here is more, this is what everyone was really excited for coming into the announcement of this game, and the marketing was the return of regular zombies, which Leon's campaign is mainly focused around the Resident Evil 2 kind of feel, mixed with Resident Evil 4 gameplay. I think as much as Resident Evil 4 is praised and this game is not, I think this game as a whole is kind of a natural evolution almost of what 4 did, with like the over the control shoulder viewpoint, and a little bit more action, quick time events. That all of that can be seen from the DNA of 4 in this one, and 5 as well. So if you want to blame anything for this game, not being received well, you got to kind of look back at Resident Evil 4 and think, well, that game is regarded as the best Resident Evil of all time, so they kind of wanted to like evolutionize that and like add to it. So they made, being able to move when you're aiming, being able to kind of dodge and use the environment to get kills, and they added like you've seen it earlier, where you can kind of like sprint onto the ground and slide and roll around and take shots, and it really does kind of make the game a lot more cinematic. I will say that they did achieve that for sure. The game is heavily cinematic for the time. It still suffers from probably the worst QTE system I've ever seen, and a lot of people don't like QTEs, and I understand why. During this era, they were like, it seemed like every game had QTE events, but this one kind of puts them more in the cutscenes. So instead of just watching a cutscene, it's kind of like you're playing it out, and there are some really, really cool scenes. However, the control scheme that they use is absolutely atrocious. It takes up half the screen for what button you need to press, and the response time is not that great. But I will say one thing the game did do very, very well is the enemy variety. I mean, look at prime example of both. That thing is disgusting, right? But then you see this atrocious quick time event button on your screen, and I biff it here, but somehow still able to pull it off, which is I figured I'd put this clip in here because it's pretty cool in Resident Evil fashion. Normally you would just see that in a cutscene, but here we get to experience it in gameplay, which is pretty cool. Here, direct nod towards the movies. The lasers come in. I don't know. So speaking of the movies, if you've ever seen the CGI movies like Damnation, Degeneration, Death Island, all of those that are produced by Capcom itself and canon to the story, this feels like you're playing through one of those storylines, which I think is actually really cool. I will say that the biggest drawback of the whole game, I would say, is this is not a survival horror game at all. Like, no way about it. It's not survival horror, and we'll touch on that more in a moment when we jump into the next section of the video, which is going to be Chris Redfield's campaign. Chris's story picks up somewhere in Eastern Europe at a bar. He's suffering from PTSD from a mission that went south a while back, where he blames himself basically for the loss of his whole unit, pretty much. And he's drinking away his sorrows. He's left the BSAA, kind of went AWOL, and they send Agent Pierce Nivens to kind of bring him out of the rut that he's stuck in. He's also suffering from a bit of amnesia, and to avoid spoilers, I won't go into that. I'll let you figure that out on yourself if you haven't played it. But anyways, he comes in, he briefs him on what's going on, saying that they need him badly. It's world threatening, and to help him kind of remember, what went wrong in the past, to get him back into, normal Chris Redfield that we all know. Now, when I first played this campaign, it immediately reminded me of like Gears of War mixed with Call of Duty. It's very militaristic. You have soldiers running around with you at all times. Big action set pieces, lots of explosions, gunfire. Now, in this campaign, you're faced against different types of enemies. With Leon, we had mainly the zombies. This is more of enemies similar to like Resident Evil 5 or 4, like the Los Illuminados, or the Degini or Magini in Resident Evil 5, where they're infected, they're bioweapons, but they still pretty much have full brain capability. They're able to fire weapons, and use melee and tactics, and they even have like heavy artillery and things of that nature. So that's where I kind of get the Gears of War's vibe, right? And there's cover based. I mean, all of the campaigns have a cover system, which kind of leads me into one of the bad aspects of the game itself, which is the control scheme. Now, you might watch this footage and think that it's really not as cumbersome as I make it look. Well, I've been playing this game for a while now. Before I decided to make this video about the road to Resident Evil 9, I was already going to put out a video on it because I feel like it's better. It's a better game than it actually is portrayed to the general public of gamers. But anyway, the control scheme is very, very cumbersome, and it is hard to get the hang of it. But once you do get the hang of it, it becomes much more fun to play. It just takes some patience and getting used to. But anyway, other than that, I mentioned previously with the Leon segment that this entire game, there is no survival horror elements whatsoever. I mean, it is a horror game, and it still very much is Resident Evil, but the staple of limited inventory and puzzle solving and enemy encounters being super threatening. I mean, yeah, it can be difficult, especially on the higher difficulty levels, but that claustrophobic feeling is mostly gone, especially in Chris's campaign. The areas are much more wide open, but you do still have your giant boss battles, right, as you're seeing here. The huge BOWs, there's a bunch of them. I don't really show most of them in this video because they are kind of like spoiler heavy. They're kind of like the main aspects of the game. This one's really cool though. Another thing too that I wanted to point out with this game is when I was kind of like doing some research, kind of going back looking at the Metacritic scores and stuff, a lot of people complained about the graphics, and I don't really. And now, granted, this is a PS4 remaster, but like I remember this game looking really good. And still, I mean, look at it. It looks, yeah, the textures aren't the greatest, and it suffers from that PS3 360 era of that everything kind of washed out with like not that great of textures, and just color palette that was so prevalent in games back then. But I think to this day it still looks pretty good. Good particle effects. Enemy models look really cool. The characters themselves are highly detailed for a game this old. But anyway, another terrible thing that I wanted to point out is we were talking about the survival horror aspect, right? Well, this game also has like a skills option where you can like upgrade your different stats and things, and it's one of the most useless and tedious systems ever. And I really mean like ever in any game I've ever played. So bad to the point where I don't even bother with it. Basically, as you play the game and defeat enemies, if they're not dropping ammo, they're dropping skill points, and you'll accumulate a ton of these things throughout your playthrough. And then at the end of the chapter, it'll take you to like an upgrade page, where you can increase firepower, your damage intake, and things of that nature. But it seems like you just never have enough points to do anything, and then when you do upgrade those things, it doesn't change anything. And especially if you're a trophy hunter out there like me, there's a trophy for maxing out all your skills. So good luck with that particular trophy. It's so bad that I'm not even going to show how it looks because it's completely useless. That brings me to the horrible inventory system as well.
Look at this.
Basically, it's not a horrible inventory system, but it's not a Resident Evil inventory system. It's just straight up action adventure, left to right on the D-pad, makes you choose your weapons, and then triangle takes you up to this screen where you can manage your herbs and things of that nature. There's no key artifacts to pick up, or because there's no puzzles or anything like that, but what you see is what you get with the inventory, and you hardly ever run out of room. So, but I mean, the production values are really good. The use of camera angles and the cut scenes are awesome in my opinion. I really like the story, and if you haven't played it, it might not seem like an essential story now, but I think I have a sneaky thought that the events of this game will eventually tie into Resident Evil 9, but I'll leave that for a separate video. Also new to the series, there's a few different vehicle sections where you get to like commandeer a vehicle, or kind of an on-rails scenario throughout the different campaigns, which you'll see coming up right here. Unfortunately, we don't get to see Chris punching the shit out of a boulder in this game, but at the very least, we do get to see him punch the shit out of a windshield, which, if you know what I'm talking about, you know. Next up, we're going to be talking about Jake. If you're still with me, and I hope you are, now would be a great time to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And now this is Jake Mueller, new character to the series, and I'll let you see and hear his introduction, who is voiced by the now legendary Troy Baker.
Stuff do anything for you yet? It's supposed to be some kind of energy booster, but I don't feel any different. You know, between me and you, I think we should ask for more money. A lot more. Pretty sure this wasn't part of the contract. But I am willing to renegotiate.
Did you take your dose?
Yeah. If you want your own head, you gotta sign up with the lady downstairs. Wouldn't recommend it though.
No question. You've got the antibodies.
So Jake's a new character in the Resident Evil franchise, but his partner, his co-op partner in his campaign is not. If you don't recognize her, if you don't know, that is actually Sherry Birkin, which is the little girl from Resident Evil 2, who is the daughter of William and Annette Birkin, that the ones that were responsible for the G virus in the original Resident Evil 1 and 2. Now she's grown up, she's a US government agent, and she has like some special abilities because if you remember, she was infected with the virus in Resident Evil 2, but given a cure, but it still ended up giving her like regenerative abilities, so she's kind of like I don't want to say invincible, but she's special. Anyways, she's tasked with bringing in Jake, who's a mercenary that's working with the insurgents group, the main enemy faction in the game, called the Giavo, but he's basically gone rogue, and now they want him dead, and she's there to bring him into the United States government because there's a key in his blood that could bring upon a cure to this new virus, which is the C virus. So I won't spoil any more on who he is, but it's pretty awesome in regards to the entire series. Now his gameplay focuses on the stalker enemy aspect of Resident Evil. So think of like Nemesis from RE3 or Mr. X from 2 or Lady Dimitrescu from Village. There's a stalker enemy in his campaign called the Ustanok, and you'll see him up pretty soon here. But his gameplay kind of also, like, his campaign also kind of reminds me of like Uncharted. They're constantly, basically, Sherry's just trying to get him to extraction to give to the government. So you're just constantly on the run, trying to find safety and running from threats while being hunted down. Which also brings me to something I have not yet talked about with Resident Evil 6, and one of the reasons probably that it didn't do so well is that the entire game was built for co-op. So much so that you can't even pause the game unless you manually switch off the connection type to single player, which if you're going to play this and you haven't before, I suggest you do that, or otherwise you won't even be able to pause it. But what focusing co-op does, don't get me wrong, Resident Evil 5 was a co-op focused game too, and I actually think this game is better over Resident Evil 5, but it kind of takes away from that Resident Evil spirit of like being alone. Don't get me wrong, most Resident Evil games there is another person there that you're dealing with whatever ordeal it is, but you kind of go off and do your own separate things. But to have somebody with you at all times, it kind of takes away from the soul of like the gameplay of Resident Evil, but it doesn't take away from the soul of the franchise itself. So I think that's the main detractor for me personally. It is a lot of fun to play in co-op, but I wish it was just kind of handled differently. And if they do end up remaking Resident Evil 5 and 6, which I think, it's quite a ways away, but pretty much inevitable at this point, they're going to have to figure out a way to kind of reinvent that and make it function just a little bit better to cater to more single player players. Now, what you just seen there was the Ustanek, which is the stalker enemy that I was telling you about. Really cool design, kind of reminds me of like Hannibal Lecter if he was injected with the C virus, with that mechanical arm that does different things. Really terrifying and menacing creature that just does not go down. Leads to some incredible chases and fights. I mean, you go against this thing multiple times throughout the game until, I won't spoil it, but until you finally attempt to take him down. And that's pretty much it for Jake's side of things. I would like to leave it more of a mystery for you. And next up, last but certainly not least, we're going to be talking about the final campaign, which is Ada Wong. Ada Wong is my favorite character in the entire Resident Evil franchise for a multitude of reasons. One, she's just super badass. 2, Leon being my second favorite character, and their tumultuous relationship is very intriguing. And 3, even Capcom themselves have kind of kept her full story hidden. Like, we don't even really fully know if she's even a real person, a clone. I mean, it's all been kept very vague, and I like that. So, in her segment, originally you had to unlock this by completing the first 3 campaigns, but then with this remastered edition, it comes unlocked right away. So it's kind of like, it's pretty cool because it starts out on this like submarine. Her mission is that she got from this man named Simmons, who I haven't talked to up to this point, but there's kind of a reason for that, as I teased earlier, the connection to Resident Evil 9. Now, I'm not saying that he's going to have a direct connection, but without spoiling anything, I think something about him is going to connect to RE9. But either way, she's going into this submarine that contains some useful information that she needs, and it has like these elite bioweapon soldiers on it, and it kind of has some like lightweight stealth mechanics to it. Not fully fleshed out or anything, but the enemies seem to like not notice her as easily, so you can do, like, as you've seen in the beginning, I did kind of like a stealth takedown. Obviously she's armed with her signature crossbow and grappling hook, which makes the gameplay unique in its own regard, and she also has pretty much the only actual puzzle in the entire game, which is this one here. I won't spoil what it is if you've never played, but it's actually a pretty decent puzzle. But yeah, other than that, you know, her action feels her combat feels a little bit different with the crossbow. It has explosive rounds, and it also has regular bolts. So, very cool. Her melee is also a lot different too. She's very defensive. If you get the timing right, you can pull off some counters and some cool stuff like that. She's an expert marksman, and I just really enjoy anything that has to do with Ada Wong, whether it's cameos, whether it's, you know, the Separate Ways DLC, which I think is one of the best DLCs ever. You'll watch this. This is cool. She flips around, kicks him in the head, and then roundhouses him and smashes his head. Really cool little sequence there. But yeah, Separate Ways DLC, I think, is one of the better DLCs like of all time. And this campaign kind of feels a little bit like that in terms of gameplay. Obviously, it came out. It kind of makes sense because it came out after Resident Evil 4, right? So they took influence from it, the original Separate Ways DLC. But she's not always on the sub either. Eventually, you go into the city, and that was awesome. Eventually, you go into the city and you meet up with kind of the rest of the crew. They all kind of meet up in different parts in China. She got her set piece here with her signature grappling hook here. Really cool cinematic sequence here. But it also, another different thing about it is, like, it's, even though you can play it co-op, when you play it single player, the co-op partner isn't even there. It's a solo experience. I feel like it's meant to be played solo. The character that you play as if you do play co-op is like just a generic agent, kind of looks like Hunk, but has no name, and he's not even present if you play it single player. Look how badass that was. So you even get to fly a freaking helicopter in one sequence, and I mean, what's more Resident Evil than flying through the streets of China in a helicopter taking down enemies? No, but seriously, like, it as funny as that may sound, like, everything that is in this game actually fits, and it feels right for this title. There's a lot of fun to be had, a lot of stuff I didn't show. If you played it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I suggest giving it a try if you're a Resident Evil fan, because it's relatively cheap, and the Resident Evil series seems to always be on sale, like, off and on, so you can get it pretty cheap. And it has a ton of content also that I didn't even cover. It has a bunch of different modes, as you see here, that I haven't even played any of them. They can be like played solo or multiplayer, which the servers are still up, believe it or not. One of the modes, the Predator, I was interested in trying because you actually get to play as the Ustanik, the creature from Jake's campaign. I'd like to see, so maybe I'll give that a shot. But that's pretty much it for this overview of Resident Evil 6. Reason I started here, there's a reason for it. It's kind of just to bring awareness to this game actually being better than a lot of people say it is, and I feel like it does. You know, it's going to have an impact on Resident Evil 9. And next up in the series, we're going to go over Resident Evil 7, so that should be a fun one, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch you on the next video. Thanks for watching. Applerski out.